they will come after us. They will come after our children. They will close the net around us while we are playing soccer mom and soccer dad, while we are arguing over so many little things and mesmerized by so many trinkets. The net even now is closing around you and your children and your grandchildren, and it does not cause you to fear. You will be isolated from society, as has already happened. Anyone who tries to run for office who actually believes the Bible will be considered a lunatic until finally we are silenced. We will be called things that we're not and persecuted not for being followers of Christ, but for being radical fundamentalists who do not know the true way of Christ, which of course is love and tolerance. You'll go down as the greatest bigots and haters of mankind in history.
The transformation is coming.
The world will see who I am.
I follow you into the darkness.
Numbers are growing.
We await the greatness that beckons.
There is gold at the end of this journey.
How do you drown out the noise?
There is no end.
Only new beginnings.
We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, in your seminaries, in your youth groups. Project 10, named after the myth that 1 person in 10 is homosexual, was spawned in 1984 in Los Angeles, California. Its goal, according to its lesbian founder, school teacher Virginia Uribe, was to persuade school children, beginning in kindergarten, to accept homosexual behavior as normal and desirable. For her efforts, Uribe was given the Award for Creative Leadership in Human Rights by the National Education Association.
The state courts must be used to force the school districts to disseminate accurate information about homosexuality. They need to hear this. Kids need to hear this. They need to hear the latest scientific information on the subject of homosexuality, and that's something that all kids need to hear, not just gay and lesbian kids. Starting from kindergarten, again, and working its way all the way through high school. This idea of talking about it one time in high school, well, we know that doesn't work. We need to start tackling this at the very early ages.
Demand number 1 repeals all sodomy laws and legalizes any and all forms of sexual expression. Age of consent laws would be changed to allow sex with youth. And dress code laws would be repealed, allowing all forms of dress or non-dress.
If you put into the law that it's there's no difference between 2 men and 2 women or a man and a woman in marriage, and that those that believe otherwise are the equivalent of bigots.
Brown said there'd be more.
Using the law to punish individuals, churches, and organizations that continue to stand for the truth.
This activist court, by redefining marriage, coming up with its own definition of marriage, something that's not included in the Constitution, will have a profound impact on religious liberty in this country.
Ray Carey is a national gay leader who could help stop the targeting of Christian bakers, florists, wedding photographers, and such who don't want to service gay weddings. CBN News asked if she'd consider a ceasefire now. The answer was a pretty firm no.
We will continue to do work in this country to make sure that everyone's right to their own personal beliefs are protected, but that people actually do get to celebrate, that they get to choose who they want around them when they get married, that they get the cake they want, the flower they want. So religion should not be used as a means to discriminate against others. It should be our own personal beliefs.
You know, I'd be interested to know, Dr. Thomas, and by the way, welcome to Dallas. I'd be interested to know your perspective on religious freedom. For example, should those bakers in Oregon who had the Sweet Cakes bakery and refused to bake a cake for a lesbian wedding, do you think the government was right to sanction them? Should they be put out of business like they are because they will not violate their religious conscience and serve a same-sex marriage ceremony? Do you think they ought to be fined by the government, or was the government wrong?
Dr. Jeffress, do you believe that those who opposed slavery and those who opposed interracial marriage should not have had the law protect them and to ensure that both black and white people were able to drink out of the same fountains?
So I take it your answer is yes, they should have their business taken away from them because they won't bake a wedding cake for a gay ceremony. Is that true?
I didn't ask that, Dr. Jeffers.
No.
I asked you what your...
But you won't answer the question, will you?
You won't answer my question.
I do not believe race is the same as sexual choice. I have an African-American pastor friend here in this community who says, don't equate sin with the color of my skin. And I believe many people of color, not all, but many, take offense that you equate sexual choices with skin color. And that's very offensive to many people.
It's very offensive to me that you would equate my sexual orientation as a sexual choice. My sexual orientation is just as valid in my lifestyle as someone's color of their skin. It is not a choice. It is something that is a God-given gift.
Pastor,
and I will not demonize people.
Pastor, all sexual activity is a choice. All sexual activity. Nobody puts a gun to your head or my head and makes us do anything sexually. It is all a choice. If you're talking about inclination, that's another story. But I think it's interesting, you didn't answer the question of whether or not that baker ought to have his business taken away because his religious belief of 2,000 years in this country says marriage should be between a man and a woman. And John, that's where I'm afraid we're going here.
You probably didn't learn in school, but your kids probably will or already are. Same-sex marriage being part of a lesson plan for students across Colorado, part of an anti-bias curriculum, even for preschoolers.
Jeremy, from the preschool level with same-sex couples featured in picture books all the way up to the high school level, curriculums are changing and teachers are not afraid to talk about it.
If you own a business in New York City, you could now face a fine for not using the correct gender pronoun when talking to transgender customers or workers. And these pronouns that we're talking about are very strange. I've never heard of them before.
Well, listen, if you go to, say, your boss or your landlord and you say, listen, I'd like to be referred to, refer to me as a woman, and the boss or landlord repeatedly does not do that, almost on purpose, that person could be in trouble.
Yeah, Greg and Rosanna, good morning to both of you. These guidelines seem to be the first of their kind in the country, and they come from the New York City Commission on Human Rights to protect the transgender community. There are about 75,000 transgender people living in New York City. So according to these guidelines, business owners and landlords in New York City can face fines of up to $250,000 if they intentionally or repeatedly refuse to address a transgender person with that person's preferred gender pronouns.
Transgender Canadians say it's legislation that is well overdue.
Consider how much things have changed in the last few decades.
This is a message to all Canadians that we live in a time where discrimination in any form is completely unacceptable.
And what Jesus do you want today? Huh? Let me talk. Do you want the Jesus of the Bible? See, the reason why you don't like the Jesus that I preach is because it's the real Jesus. He's a phony! He's fake! Oh yeah, he's anybody can say he's a phony or fake. But the Jesus of the Bible says this: I examine the heart. Man looks outwardly. Phony! But the Jesus of the Bible, he looks at the heart. Phony! Where's your bullhorn? You're a phony. What makes somebody a phony? You're a phony. What makes somebody a phony? Just because you call them a phony? Because you have a megaphone. Well, no, I'm smart. I brought my megaphone with me so everybody can hear me today.
Let other people talk.
Go get your own. You got money for booze, go buy a megaphone. You can talk all you want. They'll all listen to you, too. See, he calls me a phony because he disagrees with me.
You won't fucking let me talk, bitch. Fuck you, bitch.
God bless you, sir.
You're gonna fucking talk and you're not gonna let me talk?
God bless you, sir, with repentance.
Let me talk, bitch.
God bless you with repentance, sir. And
No, but let me talk, man. Let me talk.
You'll be persecuted for righteousness' sake.
Okay, let's don't do that, okay?
Where are you from?
I'm here in Jackson. I'm a pastor here in Jackson.
Okay.
Then why the fuck does he smell like reefer?
Louisiana.
Okay, nice to meet you. And we came.
Then why are y'all recording the bar?
Because we came because the Bible says to go into all the world, preach the gospel to every
The Bible
creature.
says or Obama says? Who do you vote for?
No, I said Jesus.
Who do you vote for?
I said Jesus.
Who do you vote for?
Who
did you vote for?
Who did I vote for?
Who did you vote for?
My candidate lost.
Then why is he still recording when we obviously say we don't want to be on camera?
Because
it's against the law to record somebody while they're...
The debate continues today after Tennessee joined 10 other states to sue the federal government. This has to do with the so-called bathroom bills that require students to use certain bathrooms.
I believe you're going to see an explosion in homeschools. If this prevails, parents are going to look for private schools. Parents are not going to send their 14-year-old daughters into the shower to the bathroom with 14-year-old boys. It's not going to happen. This has everything to do with keeping the federal government out of local issues.
This is an incredible overreach by the Obama administration, like none that we have ever seen.
School districts are being told they must allow transgender students to use the bathroom they identify with, not the gender listed on their birth certificate.
That directive came down today from the Obama administration. For example, someone who was born a boy but identifies as a girl would be able to use the girls' restroom.
Every public school in the country must let transgender students use bathrooms and locker rooms that match their current gender identity.
Now, tonight, schools are looking very closely over this joint letter from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice because it really could have a big impact when it comes to money.
Why can't parents and the public have input on this policy?
When we err on the side of fear, we amplify hysteria.
The issue had already boiled over in Fort Worth after the state's 5th largest school district said it would enforce a policy which includes letting transgender students choose the restroom they use, regardless of their gender at birth.
Taxpayers and parents should be outraged at this shocking violation and breach of the public trust. Get back to education, repeal the policy.
Public schools that do not comply risk losing federal aid.
The directive brought a defiant response from leaders here in Texas.
Democracy.
In Fort Worth, the new federal guidelines seem to intensify the debate rather than settle it.
Idaho Governor Butch Otter released a statement saying in part, threatening to withhold federal Title IX funding for failure to comply with this offensive attempt at social engineering only harms our children. It is unwarranted, unprecedented, and unacceptable.
News out of the South Loop. A man accused of an alarming crime against a little girl in a public restroom.
Right before Mother's Day, an 8-year-old girl goes into the restroom and a man who's either inside there already or follows her in.
And that's when police say this man, 33-year-old Reese Hartstern, walked in and targeted the girl, choking her and trying to lock her in a stall. The mother heard her daughter screaming and grabbed her.
It saddens me. I don't get why people do things like this. I really wish I could understand that, but I don't.
A leading early education academic says preschoolers should be introduced to the subject of same-sex marriage. The paper discusses the importance of political activism in the early learning sector. I mean, Shelley, we're talking about kids, daycare, young kids, 3, 4, 5 years old. Surely a little bit too young.
What it is, it's just normalisation of everyone so that it's not there's a mummy and a daddy and that's the only option, but just say, yeah, some people have mummy and mummies.
I think that's what this article is pushing for, going into detail and having that political activism. And I've got a problem with that term as well. Yeah. Isn't it, Phil, up to parents? I want to tell my son at that age, anyone who loves each other can marry anyone, which is what we believe.
Except in this country.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Should be able to.
All education should start at home in one way, I think, Amelia, but I think age appropriate is a good sort of thought here.
The country's highest military court weighing in on the case of a Marine who was court-martialed. She argues it was partly for her expressing her Christian faith. Monifa Sterling posted a single Bible verse in several locations around her desk. Her supervisor said the language was, quote, combative, and ordered her to take it down. But Monifa refused and was charged for disobeying orders. The text read, quote, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, end quote, a play on the verse from Isaiah that reads, no weapon formed against you shall prosper.
Controversy this morning surrounding Disney's much-anticipated Frozen 2. There's now an online push to make a big change to one of the stars. Some Frozen fans want Disney to give Elsa a girlfriend in the upcoming sequel. This is all in an effort to raise LGBT awareness.
Let it go, can't hold it back anymore.
Could Disney let its writers go ahead and make Elsa a lesbian for the sequel of Frozen? The hashtag Give Elsa a Girlfriend has gone viral. A teen tweeted that out last month and basically said it'd be iconic if it happened. Mixed feelings online, of course. We'll just have to wait and see what Disney decides.
Caitlyn Jenner is about to bear quite a bit for Sports Illustrated.
And Crystal Cruz is here with today's Eye on Entertainment.
You know, she turned some heads with that Vanity Fair cover last year. Well, this one possibly going to do the same. The former track and field star will pose for the cover of Sports Illustrated wearing very little. According to Us magazine, Jenner plans on wearing only an American flag and her Olympic medal to celebrate the 40th anniversary of her win. Jenner
I think all religions have the thing of be a good person.
Not Christianity, but by grace through faith.
Yeah.
What?
What?
By grace through faith you've been saved. So it's
nothing that we can do.
No word. Good. I'm a good girl. I don't know what they're worried about.
But Joy, then what? But what is the standard of goodness?
We project the voice of freedom forward beyond ourselves to the youth of today and to the generations of tomorrow.
We're here. We're gay. We're in the PTA. We're here. We're gay. We're in the PTA.
This is war. As far as I'm concerned, there's no room for conscientious objectors. We have got to be involved in this war.
Americans have to understand that this has been carefully orchestrated, it has been carefully carried out, and we are now in the stages of a lot of their agenda being brought to pass. And if the American people don't educate themselves and speak up against this issue, our children are going to be the losers.
Do you understand, America, that 12% of the little boys and girls growing up today are going to be lesbians and gays, and they are not going to be called faggot and dyke and queer and sissy? We are going to save our children!
The impact on the churches is going to be devastating. If a Sunday school teacher, youth director, or choir member declared they were homosexual and the church asked them to resign, the church then would have a major lawsuit on its hands. The churches who refuse to perform homosexual marriages will lose their tax exemption because they have not complied with what the court has declared to be public policy.
It redefines the family. No longer do we have a family consisting of mother and father, children. What you're going to have now is a family consisting of anybody who wants to shack up for a while for whatever reason.
I think our definitions of marriages, of relationships, of families really need to be expanded. We need to acknowledge in a legal and social way the reality of the range of different relationships that people have in our society. Men with having relationships with men, women with women, men with women, triads, group marriages.
I mean, I imagine if somebody, if everybody was all okay about it, 3 people would be all right. Love's what makes a family.
There were some threesomes married today. Do you think that's right?
Well, who's to say what's right and what's not right? I think that's what this whole thing is about.
It was their choice.
I can't impose my values on someone else. If it's right for them, then I think that's great.
Well, a big deadline is coming up in California's co-ed bathroom battle. The law there lets transgender students use any public school bathrooms or locker rooms they choose. As David Brody tells us, churches are fighting this access and pleading for help.
Right now, California transgender students can enter any bathroom or locker room in the public school system. Opponents need 500,000 signatures to change that law. Those signatures would put a measure on the November ballot, which would require people to only use public facilities in government buildings that match their biological sex.
I've got children and grandchildren, and we've got to make it right for them.
Pastor Jack Hibbs of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, is leading the way, along with churchgoers across the state. But it's an uphill fight. They need those valid signatures in the hands of the Secretary of State by this Monday, December 21st. He believes the church needs to stand up.
The church has got to get smart on how to confront the culture, how to address it lawfully, with the right kind of heart, truth, in love, yes, but by all means, we need to really make a difference by addressing the issues that are really being ramrodded down upon our family and our faith and our values as Americans, as believers.
In America, this is my constitutional right. I am an American citizen. I believe in the Constitution. Cops are coming. Let's go. Come on. Cops are coming.
Go for it. Check my website. You just saw a guy spit stuff in my face.
That wasn't right. I'm not supporting
Thank you. So what? So what are you supporting?
You're calling us all haters supporting the hate.
I'm saying look how many haters hated you within 20 minutes.
What?
2. You just saw this guy throw a bottle on my head?
No, I didn't.
Go home. You hear that? I shouldn't preach it.
Whether you're here, whether you're in Africa, whether you're Chinese, Indian, there is hope for every single person in this world, because John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whosoever," that means if you're a homosexual, that means if you're a lesbian, whosoever believes on the Lord Jesus Christ shall be saved.
That's what you need to do. God's got you doing right now.
From the beginning of creation.
What did I say to you?
You're insulting our minds by being
Okay,
here.
you have to respect and you're swearing.
I don't give a fuck.
I know you don't.
I swear at you because you're being a fucking asshole. And you know
And
what?
what did I say to you?
It doesn't matter what you're saying to
I didn't even say anything to this girl and I'm insulting her. What did I say?
It's what you're saying to everybody.
So your hatred against my religion, that's okay? Do you love anybody? Do you love anybody?
I love everybody.
And me too?
No, fuck you, religion.
I love everybody, but I don't love you.
I don't love bigots like you.
I'm a big man.
And you're preaching.
I'm preaching. What else? Did you hear me preach? Did you hear me preach? Did you hear me preach?
Stop your fucking action.
No,
I understand
say what this is. This is hatred. No, I would give her the mic. Come, I'll give you the, hold on, one at a time.
To the index of other news tonight, an historic first for the Pentagon. The Senate confirming Eric Fanning as the new Secretary of the Army, making him the first openly gay leader of a branch of the U.S. military.
Take your clothes back. I'm not going to try anything on here anyway.
Off the top at 6, a Mesquite woman outraged when she says a business allowed a man in the women's dressing room.
Lisa Stickles told me she shops at this Ross a few times a week, but never again.
Take your clothes back. I'm not going to try anything on here anyway.
Lisa said Monday she heard a man in the women's dressing room and told a manager who went to check it out.
He came right back out and called me to the side and told me that he was representing himself as a woman today.
Lisa said she complained, stayed in the store, and called corporate long enough to see the man walk out.
And he was in no way dressed as a woman. He had on jeans, a t-shirt, 5 o'clock shadow, very deep voice. He was a man.
Ross didn't comment specifically on the incident, but told me they don't discriminate against the transgender community.
Today was the day the Stonewall became an official national monument.
June 26th this year, President Obama officially designating Stonewall Inn a national monument.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you.
This new national park is for all Americans. Let us use this national park site to overcome hatred.
A God Bless America banner breaks the Penfield town code, but the woman who hung it says she is keeping it up to support our country. The town says it will not turn a blind eye to the banner hanging at the 5 Mile Cafe.
And I was driving into work yesterday and I just was very compelled with all that's going on in Orlando and in our country. I just really felt that that banner should be up.
But the town of Penfield says it can't be.
It's at 9:30. I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
And I'm Aristeo Brady. After telling the pastor last week that he could no longer advertise with the word Jesus, Colorado Springs officials now reviewing that decision.
I asked them why we could no longer use the name of Jesus, and they said it's because if you use the name of Jesus, we must allow hate messaging.
What kind of world is this if we can't say that Jesus is Lord?
They paid for the bench, and it's not, like I said, it's not hurting anybody.
I was very, very upset. That's bigger than my church. That's bigger than me.
Pastor Lawson Purdue and Charis Christian Center have been advertising their Jesus campaign for 3 years. But they were told last week if they want to continue advertising, they can no longer use the name Jesus. Pastor Purdue says that he has received numerous messages from believers, non-believers, and even strong atheist groups that taking away this message would be an infringement of our First Amendment right.
And some stop by today. They say we're agnostics, we're atheists. But we're very upset about this, because this is about the freedoms that we enjoy as American citizens.
And we're building an inclusive society.
The Marine Corps is now planning to remove the word man from 19 job titles to make the service more gender neutral.
It's been an historic week for the transgender community. On Thursday, Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced the lifting of a U.S. military ban on transgender troops. Today, they can serve openly. And on Tuesday, Democratic primary voters in 2 states elected 2 transgender women, a first for a major party, and they both happen to be named D.
What today says is that we're a country of inclusiveness.
From October, transgender troops will qualify for medical benefits, including surgery to change gender.
Being out in the military will be very challenging for a while. Certainly, just it takes time for certain mindsets to kind of to change, but that change is happening, and it will get a lot easier as time goes by.
It was a year ago that the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage in the U.S., and a federal judge has blocked a Mississippi law that some say would have made it easier to deny those marriages on religious objections that just happened last night. Are we really seeing the dominoes now fall?
A first in Lower Manhattan tonight, LGBT students and their families gathered to show their pride at the Tweed Courthouse.
This school year has been described as a game changer for LGBT rights in New York City schools. That was until Matthew Chrisson became LaGuardia High School's first gender-fluid prom queen.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the country will explore the use of gender-neutral identity cards.
I rise today to express my concern about troubling new developments in Russia. Russia's parliament, the Federal Assembly, has just approved so-called anti-terrorism legislation that actually criminalizes free speech and that attacks religious liberty. If President Putin signs this legislation into law in the coming weeks, it will be illegal for Christians to share their faith outside of a church building.
If you give homosexuals special rights in America, first of all, you've opened Pandora's box to every deviant behavior group logically being able to line up and bang on the same door and insist on special rights for themselves. You have totally destroyed, really, a realistic understanding of human rights.
Homosexuals today should not be discriminated against in ordinary conduct, and generally are not. They're entitled to the same constitutional rights of free speech. If anything, they have used free speech to the point where their conduct is probably offensive to most people.
The church, the state, hormones will decide my fate. The church, the state, hormones will decide my fate.
All of these groups, the sadomasochists, the pedophiles, the transsexuals, all were back marching in the gay rights parade. The gay agenda is to have sex in any way you please.
We will not be able to live within this country as full human beings until we have the right to love whom we love, when we love, and where we love.
And I have tremendous fears of the resulting society that will emerge if Americans, black and whites, do not stand up to this one push that's being made in our country today.
The notion that we can be indifferent toward homosexuality or heterosexuality, that it's just a flip of the coin, is really a very backward notion. No society can survive, obviously, unless it comes full forward in favor of heterosexuality. And no society in its right mind would do anything but that. That doesn't mean one is one bashes homosexuals or is cruel or seeks to wreak vengeance on them. What it does mean is that one is very clear about what the preferred style of life is.
One of ESPN's most popular analysts is out of a job tonight after a post about the transgender bathroom issue on social media.
Schilling is a former all-star pitcher and was one of ESPN's most high-profile baseball analysts.
I'm still kind of trying to figure out how the hell this all happened.
Schilling says he felt blindsided by the backlash he received after reposting this image showing a man dressed as a woman. Schilling adding his own comments saying, "A man is a man no matter what they call themselves," and "Now you'd need laws telling us differently? Pathetic."
I stated a fact. Men's bathrooms were designed for people that stand up and women's weren't. And it was nothing more than that. I mean, what if I had said, you know what, people make men's bikes just for men and women's bicycles for women?
And I know that as an American, I'm free to say anything I want. I also know that as an employee of Channel 5, I represent Channel 5. And the things I say could have consequences. So while Curt Schilling is free to express his opinions, there should be consequences if he expresses bigoted opinions.
Schilling's son also came to his dad's defense, saying on Facebook, "If he were a bigot, he would not have allowed my trans friends to stay over. He's respected pronouns and name changes."
And in this business, that's usually enough to get you fired. I know, by the way, he's not that good at his job.
But there's been no response from ESPN.
Nothing from ESPN
reaction
just
to
yet.
this yet, right?
But response from Schilling on his blog.
He
saying
defended.
that this is my opinion.
Transgender rights led to this fight Tuesday outside Santee High School. Protesters skirmished over a new gender-neutral bathroom policy at the school. Across the country, state legislatures have passed bills restricting the rights of transgender individuals. And there's some irony to this situation because just a few years ago, Schilling's daughter was accepted to a softball team on a college team, and she was told by many people online some very filthy material that was posted against her. And Schilling spoke out saying women needed to speak up for themselves, and of course now he's facing this situation.
It's a new day today. People look differently, people act differently. We're much more of an accepting culture, and this is now at the forefront of rights in America.
Target is taking a stand on the transgender bathroom controversy playing out across the nation. Target said Tuesday that transgender customers can use restrooms corresponding with their gender identity.
Each person can now use restrooms that align with their personal gender identity.
I know that it's like a trend to be more like welcoming or open-minded towards that kind of issue.
As a woman shopping at Target, do you mind a man coming in as a transgender woman into the restroom?
No, not at all.
It's an ever-changing society, so business is business. I think that they're doing what they need to do to make things evolve in regards to business. And as shoppers, we probably would need to comply with that.
Those in the transgender community to use the restroom where they are most comfortable.
Let me just put this phone in my shirt pocket here. We're going to go inside and talk to them about their new bathroom policy.
Using a hidden camera, Andy Park of Clearwater walked into a St. Pete Target and asked to use the ladies' restroom.
Sometimes I get uncomfortable in the men's room.
In the video, Park walks up to the customer service desk. The employee, almost stunned by the request, calls a supervisor.
I just came by because I wanted to make sure that I was allowed to use the women's room before I went in.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. That's correct. Yep.
That's fine.
Yes.
Dr. Eric Walsh was a respected director of public health in California, serving the poor in the trenches of the Los Angeles area. He also served on President Obama's Presidential Advisory Council on HIV and AIDS.
We had opened up a dental clinic for HIV positive individuals, and we were able to fund this clinic and allow those individuals to get care.
Dr. Walsh was an associate pastor in his church. His desire to serve the sick is based on his religious faith.
My mother was a single mother, and what got us through, what kept us out of trouble, what led us down a path to education where I now have 2 doctoral degrees, was the fact that I came from a denomination that holds education in high regard, and medicine and medical missionary work in high regard. And all those things were part of what protected me growing up. So I've held on to those beliefs.
After accepting Georgia's offer to serve as the Director of Health for Northwest Georgia, Dr. Walsh began preparing to move his family across the country. Then Dr. Walsh received an unexpected request from the state. They asked him to submit copies of his sermons.
I submitted 4 sermons to someone in the department, high up in the department. They reviewed those sermons, and the next day I no longer had a job.
Politely sent them copies of the sermons themselves. They reviewed them, and the very next day they fired.
State officials called to let Dr. Walsh know he was fired by leaving him a voicemail. What they didn't realize is that they forgot to hang up their phones.
There's no warm way to say it anyway. You're out. Very fine.
They forgot to hang up the phone, and then I just hear laughter. And I just thought, man, this is pretty rough. I mean, they have to understand being in the field that me not getting that job is tantamount to the complete destruction of a career. And when they laughed, I mean, it was almost too much to bear.
No American should be fired for something they say in a sermon.
This is allowed to stand. It sets an incredibly terrible precedent for a country that's supposed to be based on certain inherent freedoms and rights. And if this is erased for Eric Walsh, it's erased for generations to come.
Syphilis rates are on the rise. First of all, once upon a time we thought, I think syphilis was regarded as something, that's an old disease, it's under control, it's probably eradicated. But that's not the case. What are you seeing in terms of numbers?
Right, it's definitely not the case. So you already pointed out in Chicago, we are seeing now 600, 650 cases a year, up from 300, 350 just 10 to 15 years. And then on the behavioral side, one of the changes that we've seen is that back in the 90s, this used to be a disease that was largely heterosexual. And then really in the 2000s, we've seen an increase in syphilis among gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men.
To the defense of a controversial Springfield pastor accused of crimes against humanity in a lawsuit. Shortly after he preached his theories in Uganda, the country passed an anti-gay law,
where the Iowa Civil Rights Commission is essentially marching right into the church and directing how Fort Des Moines must use its own facilities. It's an absolute unprecedented government overreach.
In the suit, it claims the Iowa Civil Rights Commission is forcing churches to censor its teachings on biblical sexuality and force churches to open its restrooms and showers to members of the opposite sex.
Again, it's just an unconstitutional, unprecedented intrusion of the state into the church.
This is a bizarre story, the most bizarre of the morning. It's in Rowan County. A man there is suing state and county officials for not allowing him to get married.
But get this, the person or thing he wanted to marry was a laptop computer.
In this day and age, nothing surprises me anymore.
Chris Sevier is from Tennessee, but he is suing Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis, Attorney General Andy Beshear, and Governor Matt Bevin for his failed marriage attempt to this laptop computer. Sevier argues that if same-sex couples have the right to marry, then he should be able to marry his computer.
Good evening. Primary school pupils as young as 4 are being asked to choose the gender they most identify with before starting school. In a letter from Brighton and Hove City Council that's been sent to parents, they're asking them to support your child to choose the gender they most identify with.
Well, the move has been criticised by some parents who say that such young children don't have a sophisticated understanding of gender issues and it could be potentially harmful. But the council defended its actions as a response to the requests of families.
I would say that 4's far too young to be asking that question, and it complicates the scenario that doesn't need to be complicated.
I just thought it was a bit odd. Didn't think it was a question that needed to be asked so early in life.
I'm afraid this is symptomatic of what's going on across the country. Gender issues, gender identity, sexual issues are being foisted onto 4 and 5-year-olds. For heaven's sake, let's give these children a childhood. We can deal with these problems later in life.
Basically, I identify as non-binary, which means that I don't fully identify as 100% male or 100% female.
The form sent to parents of 4-year-olds starting school had a gender section, then underneath the following 2 sentences. We recognise that not all children and young people identify with the gender they were assigned at birth and may identify as a gender other than male or female.
Plant the seed into a child at the age of 4 that you can choose your gender if it's different than how you were created. And then you get to the college level where what you see there is the propagandizing of these students to the point where, well, whatever you want it to be. Where does this ultimately lead? Where is this ultimately going to go?
Where are their fluid standards of evaluation? I mean, clearly it's not based on any moral standpoint or any evidential standpoint. It's their opinion about it. And whereas another says, well, I don't have the right to really say that there are any standards for anything that goes on in life. Now, that is the world that we are up against. I think this, whereas we think we're talking on a common level of uniformity to say, you know, there is right, there is wrong. Hold on a second. You can't even assume that anymore, because what is right and wrong?
A heart-wrenching moment on the Hill today. MP Muril Boulanger, his health in steep decline, appeared in the House to save his private member's bill. The bill will change the national anthem.
And the lyrics to our national anthem will be a hot topic before the celebrations. Gender-neutral lyrics for O Canada are up for debate.
Colleagues say Boulanger's desire to see the lyrics of O Canada changed from In All Thy Sons Command to In All of Us Command has consumed much of his energy and focus these past months, even as his condition continued to deteriorate.
First, gender-neutral bathrooms in some schools, and now gender-neutral graduation gowns.
But now Schreiber High School in Port Washington breaking with one of its traditions. At graduation, gowns will be gender-neutral. No more whites for girls, blue for boys. The superintendent says it goes well beyond the transgender issue. The time has come to no longer separate students by gender and to demonstrate a more inclusive practice at graduation. He predicts next year at this time, gender-neutral cap and gowns will be a nationwide trend.
In the world we live in, we set up two distinct categories, man and woman, that everyone must choose between. But that doesn't actually reflect the full diversity of the human experience. Within the categories of man and woman, there is incredible diversity of gender expression. And some people, like me, don't really feel good in either category. Instead of choosing, we want to live in a world where gender and sexuality can be more fluid, more playful, and can exist outside of such explicit sorting between one category or the other.
The testimony continued. The youngest to speak was Victoria Johnson, who was accompanied by her mother, Davina.
I was a proud mother of a son and a daughter. And within the last year, I became a proud mother of a daughter and a daughter.
Then on the other hand, you had parents who talked about concerns over their children being forced to accept these changes as the new norm.
I experienced firsthand the kind of harassment that children get from their peers.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. It's not your turn.
Away from my kids. Human rights for our children. Like God. Hate them on real life topics. It's evil. Gender identity. Evil. Evil.
"13 seconds after the gun sounds, the fastest 3A girls in the state cross the finish line of the 100-meter run. Haynes' Natafon Wengyat is among them, but Wengyat's story is different than any other runner at the state championships. She was born a male.
It is not fair and it is not right for our female athletes, and we have a responsibility to protect our girls that have worked really hard, that are working.
You know, and if a person feels that they are born in the wrong body, who are we to tell them that they are not? What we need to do as loving and caring and supportive citizens of this whole world is to provide an opportunity and a solution, and that starts at a really young age. And we have that opportunity and solution. That comes with our line, that comes with our clothing.
Well, a school sparking outrage for calling the sheriff's office on a 7-year-old for handing out, get this, Bible verses to classmates. A teacher at the elementary school in Southern California banning the Bible notes like these during lunch, saying there should be a separation of church and state. A sheriff's deputy even showed up at the boy's house and told him and his mom to stop because someone might get offended.
US Secretary of State John Kerry has officially declared that the Islamic State militant group is committing genocide against Christians and other religious minorities across the Middle East.
Facing persecution, murder, and torture each day, Christians overseas are persecuted for their religious beliefs. These individuals are being slaughtered, raped, and sold into slavery and forced to watch as their churches are burned down. This morning, the State Department labeled these atrocities as genocide. This is mass genocide by ISIS and other radical jihadist groups that is taking place throughout the world.
They were martyred and they were persecuted as enemies of the state, as child molesters, as bigots, as narrow-minded, stupid people who had fallen for a ruse and can contribute nothing to society. Your suffering will not be noble. So your mind must be filled with the Word of God when all people persecute you and turn on you.